So, supersonic, low altitude, nuclear powered nuclear bomber. Hi, I'm Tyler Folse. I'm a nuclear engineer with a little over 10 years of experience in the commercial nuclear power industry, from engineering to operations to emergency response. Don't claim to know everything there is nuclear, but I can certainly share some knowledge. Today we're going to be looking at, from what I've heard, is a pretty goofy video by BlueJay called The Worst Radioactive Ideas in Nuclear History. Those to be some obscure stuff. I wonder if I've heard of any of these before. Let's check it out.
Meet Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor responsible for the creation of the world's most peaceful award. And dynamite. Now, our little Nobel here was a pacifist.
I just always appreciate the irony of that so much, that he did dynamite and it was a peaceful award, so.
And he intended his exciting invention to be used for construction and mining. But little did our Swede know that when a world leader hears of a device capable of curing an object's need of a violent dismemberment, there are a few things higher up on the to-do list than rocks. There are a plethora of examples of breakthroughs in science and technology finding uses outside of their original
Really? The Tide Pod one?
intent, and the discovery of radiation, nukes, and atomic energy are no exception. So
Interesting that in this case, this one was used as a weapon before, that it was for nuclear stuff, a weapon before it became used for peaceful production of nuclear power. And nuclear fusion has been a weapon since the 1950s, and we're still figuring out how to use it to produce peaceful, large-scale energy production.
sit back and crack open a Nuka-Cola, because today we're talking about some of my favorite nuclear applications in history. Now, there's a popular saying that all good things come in threes, and this is something that the United States really likes to take to heart. You've got 3 branches of government, 3 founding documents, 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I think there's 5. There's 3. And so it's almost poetic that their experimental nuclear cruise missile
One other thing about 3 involving nuclear weapons is it's referring to the trifecta doctrine of having silo-launched ICBMs, nuclear submarines, and nuclear bomb-armed bombers. So there's another one.
program also came with 3 separate phases of mass destruction. Let me introduce you all to Project Pluto. But I thought the whole theme of this video was how nuclear energy was used outside of its original intent. But Cold War arms race project sounds pretty textbook purpose to me. Yes and no, Tim. While Project Pluto was, at the end of the day,
I've never heard of Project Pluto.
nuclear weapon, don't let the end goal deceive you, for this project had a few unique innovations up its sleeve. It's the Cold War, late 50s, and US scientists had a burning question on their minds. How do you make a nuclear missile more nuclear? Sure, you got the nuclear warhead, but that was delivered by thrusters powered by all this weak, conventional rocket fuel. No. What we really need is a nuclear-powered nuclear weapon. Thus, Project Pluto was born.
Wow. Okay. Now, I've never heard of this. I've heard of nuclear impulse drive for a spacecraft, Project Orion. Never took off, but having a nuclear power thing, and yeah, since they're probably not going to put shielding or containment on this sort of thing, so this is probably going to leak a lot of radiation. You wouldn't be as concerned about it in space. You just want to protect the habitation module, because space, there's so much background radiation anyway. One of the things we take for granted on Earth is how much the magnetic fields and the atmosphere protects us from cosmic radiation. So that'll be more of a concern in space, but yeah, putting a containment device on something like this would probably make the rocket too heavy, so I'm guessing in this design they didn't do that, which is probably why this is among the worst radioactive ideas.
This here is a Ramjet engine, which
So the M is the Mach number. Okay, so inlet supersonic in, compresses it, and exhausts it out. Okay.
is forward motion to ram cold air inside, heat it up, and then use the resulting expansion to thrust the engine forward. This process requires a source of heat, which comes from burning a fuel, but luckily, ripping apart atoms with subatomic particles is also a rather toasty process. So the idea was to stick an
It was just throwing in a bunch of unrelated stuff like that. It's an interesting presentation style.
shielded nuclear reactor inside a cruise missile to power a ramjet.
Like when he said cruise missile, I was expecting like Tom Cruise to be riding on a rocket or something.
capable of delivering an extra nuclear present to their Soviet comrades. Welcome to the facility. Just to get this out of the way, I heard you were transferred here due to some HR complaints from your coworkers, so I just want to be clear, we have a zero tolerance harassment policy here, John. Nah, dude, won't be a problem. I learned my lesson. Good. Anyway, here we have a Ramjet engine. It requires a strong heat source to operate. I can think of a few hot things to ram in there. Know what I mean? Yeah. Wow. Nuclear energy. John, you're a genius! Yeah. If this process was successful, it was theorized that the Supersonic Low Altitude Missile, or SLAM for short, would have a mind-boggling
Love these acronyms they come up with.
range of 113,000 miles, or 7.16 billion gumballs, meaning it would be able to stay airborne for days or even weeks before running out of the glowing juice, while an ICBM could also reach anywhere.
Cute little ICBM thing.
On Earth, the main benefit of the cruise missile was that it could fly at just 500 feet off sea level, meaning it would be invulnerable to interception and virtually undetectable by the technology of the time.
Kind of like that whole hypersonic missile threat of being, it's the same sort of doctrine of having it low so it avoids standard interception practices.
To achieve this, air would be blown directly through the unshielded reactor for heat.
Unshielded reactor. It's gonna dump. People are gonna get some nasty neutron dose while this thing's gonna be operating.
This little bundle of fun would be showering everything below it with some extra spicy air as it flew by, shattering eardrums at Mach 3. Edwin Lyman from the...
That's another thing. Forget the radiation. Flying so low at Mach 3. I also just wonder, because like how thick the atmosphere is, that low. What is this thing made out of to prevent it from falling apart? Because most cruise missiles are subsonic.
CS stated that even before reaching its target, the missile would be a, quote, flying death factory, with the Nevada National Security Site stating it would deafen, flatten, and irradiate people along its path, much like a group of Harley riders. And that's just the first of the 3 phases of Project Pluto's mass destruction. So then we're taking body shots off the grizzly bear, right? Huh? Say, do you taste iridium?
These transitions.
But just like how Harley riders possess the physical urge to rev their engines and ruin a community.
Iridium can be a fission product, but another thing is the actual reaction itself is a hazard at this point. Fission products are what you're mostly concerned about for like a radioactive release from, say, a nuclear power plant, because during an accident, the reactor shuts itself down pretty quickly, but this is an operating reactor, so it's much worse in that you're going to get neutron dose, which is 10 times worse than, say, gamma emitters hitting your skin, which is the most common sort of radiation you would get from fission products. So, oh yeah, this is way worse.
Morning, so too does our little SLAM missile desire to rev its engine per se, only it does so about 8 billion times louder. That's because the missile could hold
278, wow. For 278 decibels, the shockwave will shatter your bones. Forget just your ears.
anywhere from 14 to 26 thermonuclear warheads to drop along its path. Because the only thing better than one nuclear attack is
several.
Of course.
So supersonic, low altitude, nuclear powered nuclear bomber. Wow. I've never heard of this. This is that's pretty good.
This leaves the third and final phase of destruction, where Project Pluto detonates its own warhead on the last target. One final nuclear ribbon to top off an apocalyptic wake, the American way. Two versions of the nuclear ramjet.
A military mashup machine and all that nuclear firepower. Have any of you heard of this before? Because I haven't. This one's way, way out there. It almost sounds fake, like it's from some sort of bizarre movie that a Bond villain has or something.
Were built and tested successfully, but regardless, the Pentagon was concerned about how this weapon could provoke an escalated Soviet response. Something about a single low-flying cruise missile that drops a few suns as it plays connect the dots across the Soviet Union, all whilst leveling infrastructure, rupturing eardrums, and blanketing pedestrians with copious amounts of cancer sauce, was deemed too provocative. Yeah, and there's room for at least, 20 hydrogen bombs in here. Whoa, okay, let's pump the brakes here. This is getting out of hand.
Probably not a serious one. Maybe a propaganda type weapon that obviously they never tested this, but kind of like the Tsar Bomba was. Horribly impractical weapon, but super, super powerful. 50 megatons, but the thing weighed 27 tons and would have to be carried by on the external part of a bomber, so it would be so easy to intercept. So this might be another one of those propaganda type weapons that could be impractical, but I don't even know if the Soviets have heard of this.
Yeah, I agree. It's getting a bit unethical. So we still on for testing those nerve agents on our own ships and sailors, right? Yeah, actually, let's move on to the Sarin Gas Trials. This, along with innovations in ICBM technology, led the program to be scrapped in 1964. But if you were really rooting for our little flying Chernobyl, don't you worry. In a speech that could be mistaken for a Bond villain audition, it was revealed that
this thing would be so much worse than Chernobyl. Chernobyl at least shut itself down when the reactor tore itself apart. This thing is going to be causing massive explosions while the reactor is still operating, and then causing even bigger explosions. So yeah, Chernobyl doesn't even compare to this.
other nuclear-powered missile was being developed by everyone's favorite Stalin stan, Root Tootin' Putin McShootin' himself. And that's not just me talking. The NATO reporting name for the weapon is literally Skyfall. But I remain skeptical about this missile's future. Surely we can count on our little Putin pie to not do anything rash. Speaking of rashes, step right up.
Looking at the date of this video, 9 months ago, so the war has been going on since this video came out. Okay.
Step right up. My name is Dr. Delight, the dazzling, dreamy-eyed devil here to deliver diverting, delicious, and delectable delicacies right to your divine darlings. I've got an item for every need, every pain, every slight, and every bite. Your sweet tooth shan't seek sweeter after one bite of my radium chocolate. Polish those pearly whites with some radioactive toothpaste. Give Timmy a radium scope for the little chap's birthday. Fix that face with some radium cosmetics. We've got radium in your water and radium for your
People are gonna get some nasty doses. Oh, man.
butter, a bit of radium butter for that fillet, and even radium lingerie.
Basically, radium being the generic magic snake oil salesman type stuff that has magical properties. The magical properties is you're gonna get a nasty dose of radiation.
Stuff it up your trunk and even fix your junk. Yeah.
Especially if you take it internally. Any sort of ingesting, that's gonna make it worse.
Yes. You just name it, and we've got radium in it. So, what'll it be, young lad? My wife is leaving me. I've got radium divorce papers. A radium vibrator? What?
Wow. They could go there.
It's just getting good. We can stuff it up your trunk? We can't air this. No, what's
If you do that, you're gonna get a much nastier dose.
wrong with it? It's got pizzazz, character, sex appeal. Are you supposed to be doing a history video? Oh shit, that's right. Radium. Discovered in 1898 by the unstoppable French power couple, Marie and Pierre Curie, radium is a metallic element that can be found naturally inside of uranium ore and also appears in minuscule amounts in virtually all rocks, soils, waters, plants,
Putting the rock as a rock.
and animals. It was quite an exciting metal.
Though people are naturally radioactive, not with radium, but to say the rock is radioactive, he's not wrong. You cuddle your spouse for a year, you're gonna get about the same amount of dose you would from a couple of dental x-rays, which isn't very much, but people are radioactive, which is interesting.
That took the world by storm in the early 20th century due to its new and practically magical property, radioactivity. Radiation was a new phenomenon at the time, captivating the public who were unaware of its dangers and instead saw it as this promising and powerful force. Not only did radium give off this new force, but it also glowed really cool, so it began to find itself marketed in all sorts.
That's where the green glow comes from. Radium, not uranium, not plutonium, none of that weird stuff you see in like the Hulk with gamma radiation being green. Nope, that's invisible. It's just light that you can't see at super high energy. So here you go. Here's your green glow.
Products from foods to cosmetics to suppositories, all claiming it had mystical healing properties. This promotion of fraudulent medical pseudoscience is known as
Well, that's the opposite effect.
radioactive quackery, which is just an adorable name. Radium was pretty much the early 20th century equivalent of healing crystals, only instead of getting laughed at and told to go to the Sonic convention with your Chaos Emeralds, loser, the DNA in your bones got rapidly bombarded by alpha particles from what was essentially nature's Chaos Emeralds.
Alpha particles are the worst things to take internally. I mentioned that neutrons were 10 times worse. They go right through you. Alpha particles, normally they won't penetrate your skin. But if you eat something that's that has radium or any type of alpha source in it, it will be 20 times worse.
Particularly interesting radium product comes from the 1930s by the name of Radithor. Despite what it sounds like, Radithor was not some obscure Marvel hero that the MCU dragged into the spotlight for Phase 47, but rather a radioactive elixir containing everyone's favorite
It really sounds like it though.
spicy metal. Priced at $5 for a 2-ounce bottle, around $100 today, this potion was quite literally an energy drink, as it contained triple distilled water with a
I see what he did there. Drink that contains energy that you don't want to drink it. That's horrible.
of 1 microcurie of radium-226 and 228 isotopes each. It was marketed as a cure for the living dead and a perpetual sunshine that could cure
It'll cure the living part.
users' impotence and enhance the body. While today we have 16-year-olds dry scooping pre-workout with a cotton candy bang chaser, the Chads of the 1930s were practically giving off secondhand skin cancer as they pounded drinks with an ingredient 3 million times more radioactive than uranium.
I know he's making a joke, but I actually saw this in the Chernobyl series. Radiation's not contagious. You're not gonna get it secondhand. Especially because he's taking it inside. Remember when I said that alpha particles won't penetrate the skin? Well, it won't penetrate your internal organs going outside to the other person either. So you're not going to spread it.
Radithor's most famous customer was Eben Byers, an amateur golf champion who took several doses of the spicy sauce each day, believing it gave him a toned-up feeling. A few years later, he would die from radiation poisoning after his jaw literally fell off and his bones and tissues began disintegrating. His body was so
The jaw makes sense. If it's going in your mouth, you're gonna get a targeted dose there. Yeah, it's horrible, but not surprising.
radioactive that he had to get buried in a lead-lined coffin, and his corpse was still found to be highly radioactive after it was dug up over
So lead-lined coffins, historically accurate, but overkill. Especially alpha emitters, but it's not gonna like leave you or contaminate anything else. Radiation doesn't spread like that. But people really did do the lead-lined coffin and then encase them in concrete in the case of after nuclear accidents such as SL1 and Chernobyl.
30 years later. Now, you're probably curious how a doctor could possibly peddle a health potion containing a substance with very little research around it. And that's because the company owner behind the drink, William J.
FDA probably didn't exist back then.
Bailey, was definitely not a doctor, as he had dropped out of Harvard, but told everyone he was
That too.
anyway, because fuck it. So this can cure my erectile dysfunction? Yeah, dude, I made it myself. I'm a doctor. Oh, score. Okay, can I just throw this in my bag, or is the bottle fragile? Oh, it's the strongest. Trust me, I'm a material engineer. What? Hey, this is the stuff that killed that golfer. You're gonna end up in jail. Nuh-uh, my dad's the president. And he went to space. The golfer's death led to the demise of many other patents on radiation-based medication as the FDA tightened its restrictions. But don't you worry, there were
Wow, so they did exist. They just didn't care back then. Okay.
many other non-medicine based radium products to be sold, such as perhaps my favorite and yet another miracle invention by our lovely William J.A. Bailey, the Radiant Doctrinator. Priced at up to 1,000 buckaroos, the device consisted of small pieces of paper coated with radium sulfate and stuffed into a credit card-sized metal case with a mesh window. This atomic credit card was touted as the last word in scientific manufacture and was advertised for a variety of uses,
What does that mean?
such as directing men to put it under their scrotum at night and to, quote, radiate as directed. Now, I know what you're thinking.
Radiate as directed. That's, sounds pretty good.
But what if I roll over and my jingle bells don't get the full dose? Don't you worry, champ. It came complete with its own special jock strap to roast them chestnuts overnight. William Bailey would go on to die from bladder cancer in 1940.
I've never heard of any of these. That's...
But perhaps in another timeline, his radioactive quackery would have actually yielded some results. Let's take a quick break from talking about history, thank God, and talk about some modern news. No! Back in 2021, there was a peculiar trend of people getting stuck in things. You had people stuck indoors due to physical illness, laundry machines due to mental illness, or the Suez Canal due to comedic incompetence. March of 2021 saw a quarter-mile-long cargo ship jam itself into the Suez Canal, blocking passage. And while the world's economy took a massive hit, the meme economy couldn't have been healthier. But unfortunately, humor isn't as valuable to the world's world's leaders is real money, something I plan on changing once I'm elected. So plans have been made to widen the Suez Canal to prevent future blockages. But wouldn't it have been much nicer if we had already had a solution to this problem implemented in the first place? Back in 1963, a United States proposal was considered that would have done just that, pitching
I think I've heard of this one. Using nukes to basically make a canal. Crazy.
the idea to build an alternative to the Suez Canal through the Negev Desert in Israel. However, the 160-mile long canal would have been astronomically expensive to dig with the excavation methods of the time. But, as luck would have it, the world had just invented some fun new toys that were excellent in making big holes. There's no way we could dig
This brings us back to Nobel again, except Nobel nukes. That's just bringing that up there. Extreme mining and canal digging.
that. We'd never get the budget. Yeah, I mean, if only we could just, like, nuke our way across it. What are you doing? Jim, no. Like a preteen getting their first taste of power in Minecraft creative mode, the plan was to explode a long line of bombs across the desert to dig a Suez alternative canal. To do this, the US would need to use 520 nuclear bombs throughout
That's a lot. How big are they?
Israel to excavate the required amount of earth at a ballpark cost of only $575 million. The paper described itself as a crude preliminary
It's actually not that expensive considering it's 520 nukes we're talking about.
investigation, in that using these little nuclear excavators appears to be within the range of technological feasibility, which doesn't sound all that confident of an assessment. More like some scientist who used to blow up mailboxes with firecrackers as a kid thought, it go boom and then gone. The project would have sought to use nukes only throughout the unpopulated desert wasteland portions of the canal, where radiation wouldn't be a threat to people. You know, probably. However, while this idea would have been strategically
Probably.
valuable and eliminated the Suez monopoly on shipping passage, it never got past the proposal stage. This is likely because the paper avoided one big elephant in the room, with itself stating, another problem which has not been considered is that of political feasibility. You know, whether or not the most politically tense portion of the Middle East would be open to the idea of 1,000 nuclear firecrackers.
Yeah, I was gonna say people have been war there for millennia, and you're just gonna put a bunch of nukes in the middle and just see what happens. That's crazy. Also, surface detonations or subsurface detonations in this case, they would cause the largest amount of contamination to the ground or whatever they're digging up with. The reason why a lot of nuclear tests haven't produced the fallout you would expect is because they were typically airbursts detonated higher, and that's also what you'd use to attack a city. That's why Hiroshima and Nagasaki where the radiation didn't kill as many people as the actual explosions did. However, in this case, this will be a case, so areas evacuated, so no one would probably die in the blast, because you're just going to move everyone out of there, but the contamination and the radiological hazard would actually be the worst case in this particular scenario, because you're doing it on the ground and underground, so you're gonna contaminate a lot of that stuff. Of course, if you use 520, you might just vaporize the contaminants anyway, and then it'll just get into the water. So, yeah, you can see why they would object to something like this.
Backyard. Yeah, so we use 4 2-megaton nukes for every mile along this part. What?
2 megaton's a big nuke. That's above average. 400 to 800 kilotons is about typical, but I guess here we're using them as crazy digging equipment.
I said we'd use 4 2-megaton. Now, if we back ourselves up a little bit to note the first sentence of the memorandum, it reads, another interesting application of nuclear excavations. Another? You mean? Yes, Tim. This was not the first time the idea of using nukes for digging was thrown around. In fact, out of all of them, this one received the least amount of development. The Israeli Canal Plan was all a part of a larger program by the name of Project Plowshare, an initiative to investigate
Pokemon classified documents. Nice.
civilian use of nuclear bombs for peaceful construction. This included ideas such as widening the Panama Canal, carving roads through mountains, nuclear fracking for natural gas, and creating various
Fracking for you're gonna blow up the gas. This is crazy. This is up there with in Armageddon drilling a hole in an asteroid and putting a nuke in there to see what would happen.
of water, such as harbors, canals, and aquifers. Through 27 different nuclear tests, it was discovered that while the concept would work, the whole nuclear part left things a bit too radioactive for comfort. However, I, for one, would
Yep, that's exactly it. It contaminates too much of the ground compared to, say, an airburst.
some radioactive natural gas. Yeah, we just got this new gas fire pit. No need to worry about inhaling smoke anymore. No, sir. My lungs and overall physical health are much better off now on account of the natural gas.
So radon is a real radioactive gas. It's not doesn't make a green flame, but it is a hazard that exists underground. It's a mining hazard that can even exist in certain buildings, people's houses. That's why it's surveyed a lot of times when you make a basement. Someone does a radon survey, but it looks nothing like this.
And all. Todd, why is the fire green? Here, have a roasted marshmallow. Sup? Project Chariot progressed the furthest out of all of the Project Plowshare initiatives, which sought to create an artificial harbor by blowing up part of the Alaskan coast. It was abandoned because the local Inupiat village protested the plan, causing the US to have a change of heart, and definitely not because it was too expensive. I enjoyed reading about that one because it's not often you hear stories about native villages getting their way, so it's nice to learn that they remain safe from any potential radiation poisoning. Until it was discovered that a few years later, the US had buried nuclear material there anyway, probably causing the recent spike in the village's cancer deaths.
Never heard of this one either. Wow, it's doing a great job pointing out a bunch of obscure things, which is great.
Oh, America. Whether it was insane or truly ahead of its time, no peaceful nuclear bomb projects ever saw fruition. Except for the Soviets, who actually succeeded in stopping some gas fires. Duh. So, how about it, Tim? Feel like an expert in all things nuclear?
So there you have it, a bunch of obscure uses for radioactive material that I've never even heard of before. Let me know if you heard of these before watching this video, because that's wonder where he got all his information from, and also what a crazy, goofy way to present it. I actually liked it because it's otherwise, you'd be like horrified that someone even thought of something like this. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.